Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. 5 minutes to Representative Gaetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to begin by seeking unanimous consent to enter into the record a press release from last year from the Department of Defense entitled, Department of Defense announces recruiting and retention numbers for fiscal year 2022 through March of 2022, and it reads, overall, it is clear the broader recruiting market continues to deteriorate and recruiting shortfalls can no longer be solely attributed to COVID-19.
Without objection.
So we just heard from Secretary Austin moments ago that COVID was the driving headwind. That was the headwind was the term he used in these recruiting challenges that trouble us all. But the department is saying that it's not COVID. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, what do you guys think is the driving factor of the recruiting collapse that we are currently overseeing? Any of you who are particularly interested?
Representative Gaetz, that's a great question, and what we are seeing is that it's not just one factor. It is a variety of factors when we look at obesity, physical fitness, misconduct, behavioral health challenges, knowledge gap. Of what we saw from our data was that individuals that we surveyed identified that they would be potentially putting their life on hold if they serve. So not attributable to one single factor, but a multitude.
I agree with that. We've got a younger generation that's too dumb, fat, slow, addicted, and on video games to be eligible to serve in the military. And it's really troubling to hear that the response is to thin the soup rather than to do what we can earlier on, maybe through our education system or our nutrition programs, whole of government, to try to get a greater share of our folks capable. Does anyone here attribute any of the recruiting challenges we face to the new DEI push? Any of you? Raise your hand if you do. None of you. Well, I would suggest that that is misguided. I have heard directly from people that this embrace of DEI and white fragility and white rage harms our recruiting effort in the area of the country where we do our best recruiting, in the American South. I have additional questions for you, General Miller. How many Republicans running for Congress had their personnel records unlawfully compromised by the United States Air Force?
Thank you for that question. So we did have a PII breach, 11 individuals overall. Their data was released.
Well, you say breach. When I hear breach, what I hear is that like someone hacked or broke in or got the information. You gave this information.
Yes, we did. No,
right.
the Air
So
Force
it wasn't a breach, it was an illegal release.
It was a, yes, it was.
Right.
You're right. We take full responsibility
How many?
for that. 11.
11.
Yes.
And all Republicans, right?
I don't know the answer to that. I know some of them were, but I think that.
But if I represent to you that it's all or almost all Republicans.
Almost all Republicans, that's correct, yes.
And this information was given to the due diligence entity, right?
There was an entity, yes. It was.
Yeah, and it's an opposition research entity that gets hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Democratic Senatorial campaign apparatus, right?
I don't know that much about due diligence, but I know that we released the information inappropriately.
Why did you do that?
It was an error. We did an investigation as soon as we found out. We notified all of the members in which their data was released. We have put in place multiple layers of checks and balances. We did a retraining.
Who's been fired for doing this?
We have taken the appropriate action.
Okay. Who's been fired?
We've taken the appropriate action.
It's a fascinating answer, just not to my question. Who's been fired?
I can't answer that.
Has a single person been fired?
I do not know the answer to that.
Shouldn't you, though? I mean, here we are having recruiting challenges. You guys are releasing personnel information of predominantly Republicans to a Democrat opposition research firm. You run personnel for the United States Air Force, and you can't tell me whether anyone has been fired for this unauthorized release?
Congressman, I can tell you that we have taken the appropriate action.
Well, but you
OSI.
deem it appropriate. But what if we don't? Because we have civilian control of the military. Mm-hmm. We may have to change our laws to hold people accountable. And pardon me for not trusting your vague reference to the layers that you've put on. But, Mr. Chairman, I request that this committee get specific answers for what the accountability regime was for this unlawful action by the United States Air Force, and that we not take as an article of faith the representation that they think they've taken the appropriate action. They've taken the illegal, inappropriate action to compromise these records, and I think we should hold them accountable for it.
On that note, General Miller, for the record, can you submit to the committee what those appropriate actions were?
We certainly may.
Okay, I yield 5 minutes to Representative Houlihan.
I have spoken repeatedly with the Secretary of the Army about replacing aging homes at Fort Leonard Wood in my home state, and there is no doubt in my mind that service members deserve better than they are getting right now. I was just there a few weeks ago. I toured the homes myself. I spoke to residents. I spoke to spouses. I spoke to children who lived in the homes. These homes need to be replaced. What concerns me is the Army doesn't seem to have a plan to replace this aging housing stock. So let me just ask you this. In your opinion, how does the availability or maybe lack of availability of quality military housing for service members and their families affect recruiting and retention?
Senator Hawley, good afternoon. The Army takes the care and quality of life of all of our service members and their families very seriously, so we are making and committed to investing in our housing within not just that, but within our daycare centers, child care, offering opportunities, expanding beyond that for spousal employment, to put kind of a whole package on the table to ensure that our facilities and our care and commitment towards family members is first class.
You say a whole package. When will we be seeing this package?
Senator, we continue to work on it, and I can take that question for the record, please.
Well, that's fine. I mean, but let me just say again, for the record, I've said this in the full committee, I'll say it again here, that I think we're past the point of continuing to kick this down the road. I mean, this is a problem now. Frankly, at Fort Leonard Wood, it was a problem a decade ago. But listen, I've been there. I mean, I've seen it myself. I've talked to the service members myself. I've been in their houses. I've been in their kitchens. I've looked at their bathrooms where there's mold growing. I've seen that they don't have places for their kids. I've seen the substandard living conditions, and it just isn't acceptable, General. You know what? I promised those service members that I'd be a royal pain in the you-know-what until something changed. So I'm keeping that commitment, and I'm going to continue it until something changes. And frankly, I've heard this now it's going on 2 years. I've only been in the Senate 3, but I've heard it continuously that, well, we'll get to it, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. Well, at Fort Leonard Wood, we haven't gotten to it. And I bet, if we went around the table here, I bet that the other members of the subcommittee would have the same situation in their state. So I'll give you the question for the record, but I just want to put on notice again, and you can take this back, that I want to see some progress on this, and I want to see it soon. And what I don't want to see are any more commitments from the Army that they're going to spend X number of dollars. This happened last year. We're going to commit X number of dollars to Fort Leonard Wood, and then as it turns out, $0 were spent on housing. I'm still ticked off about that, and I don't want to see it happen again, and I want to see progress made. So that's my piece. I think you understand where I'm coming from. General Miller, let me come to you. Can you help me with something here? Anderson Air Force Base, I understand, this is in Guam, of course. Leaders there recently received an official email that prohibited them from using pronouns or descriptors like he, she, youngest, oldest, male, or female. Why is that? I mean, what's going on?
Senator Hawley, thank you for that question. Actually, that is, we've been talking a lot about that because it was an email, from my understanding, that went out locally from one of the commanders there, and I don't remember at what level. I don't know if it was a group commander or the wing commander there. I believe that it was a Facebook post that went out based on a question. It is not the Air Force policy to not use pronouns. And so I think it was a social media, exacerbated by individuals that said that they were directed for that.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's progress. So you're saying, I'm looking at a news article here published August 31, 2022, saying that PACAF has sent this letter around. Leaders of the base are instructed, do not use pronouns, age, race, etc. And they go on. The unauthorized examples of unauthorized language are male, female, youngest, oldest, he, she. But you're saying that that was not an official communication, that has not been a directive.
That is not an official communication from the HAF, correct.
Okay, okay. And so your position to me is today that is not policy and that they have not been so instructed.
That is
that
correct.
This is
That
a
is
social
not
media
policy.
kerfuffle. I mean, this is not real. It's not happening.
I don't know if it's not happening, but it is not an official policy from the Department of the Air Force.
Okay. I ask because part of the way it's been reported is that the rationale is to help with lethality and also recruiting. And it was curious as heck how not using he, she can help with lethality and how it's helping with recruiting. But I take your word for it that this is not policy, and that satisfies me. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.